Hello, I'm Enzo, and today I'll be playing Gregtech New Horizons. This is part 4 of the series, and to start out, a lot has changed. Gregtech has gotten a massive update, and a lot of stuff has been changed, especially from what I've seen so far, and it's all for the best. I also migrated my save and everything else from CurseForge over to Prism Launcher, as some of my viewers recommended. I didn't really notice any differences, but I think it does load a bit faster, so that's nice. Odd thing is that it actually crashed a whole lot more, at least at the beginning. It seemed to stabilize over a little bit of time. That's also the reason my skin is just the default Steve, not my Kashino skin that I normally use. I don't actually know how to change that on Prism Launcher. Like, I did in the account settings or anything like that, but it's not appearing in game. So I'll probably figure that out for next time. So the first massive change that I care about, which actually a comment told me, so thank you for that, they actually changed the crop managers and how the crops work. Remember last episode when I was talking about how they weren't harvesting my ore berries? Well, before you would need the respective block for the ore berry to fully mature and then be harvested. That would be extremely expensive, especially when it comes to the aluminum ore berries, but it would still suck for like iron and gold. But now there's a new option to harvest crops when they're not fully grown, which is absolutely awesome. My farm actually works now, and I'll show it off a bit more later. The wait is worth it though, because let me just tell you guys now, growing ore berries like this is just stupidly overpowered. I practically get free aluminum at this point. It's kinda crazy. Right now, I'm just working on a few tiny things, and in this case, it's actually building a centrifuge to dump a ton of redstone into, because redstone actually gives me some interesting stuff. Pyrite, which isn't super useful, but it can give me iron and sulfur. Mercury, which also isn't very useful. I'll turn that into quicksilver so I can kind of just store it. But most important of all, I can get silicone out of this, which is one of my few sources of it for right now. I'll unlock way more soon enough, but I'm going to need lots of silicone for later on. And, like with most things, I might as well start it as soon as possible. One of the best parts about making these videos is the great comments I get. Last episode, I got a ton of super useful comments, which I very much appreciate. You see, I had no clue how the power in this mod pack worked, but after reading those comments and experimenting a bit more, I finally understand how it works. It's actually quite a bit like power in real life, which I expected. A bunch of the terms just didn't make complete sense. I'm definitely not going to do this well, but I'm going to try to explain how the power works. Since I'm working with it right now, these steam turbines are a great example. They all produce 32 energy units of power and 1 amp. Now that is extremely important. You see, one generator can power several machines at once. Alright, that makes sense. But obviously, you can't go above 32 energy units. If you go above 32 energy units, it's going to start taking power from another one of the generators. That's going to activate a second amp on the wire. That's why you need, higher amperage wires when you're operating tons of machines. Another super useful comment told me that having wires that are, way too large, like the 16x ones I was using, is really bad. And it makes sense because you actually lose more power for each wire for each amperage. Now, I've been mathing it out a bit, but I feel like something's not right because I should have 0 power to any of these machines, but maybe I just have enough generators or something like that. Long story short, yeah, don't go for 16 amp wires unless you have lossless cables, because I lost countless, millions of liters of steam just because I didn't know. For now, I'm moving down to 4x wires because I decided that's most reasonable. 8x would lose way too much power, and I don't have enough machines to actually need those. Just yet, at least. Again, when you're dealing with the redstone alloy, which is lossless cable material for LV, you can literally just make the 16x wires. They're just way more expensive. It literally takes 8 ingots per wire, which also means 8 silicone, and it takes a super long time in the electric blast furnace. After that, I started working on my next project. There's only a slight issue. You see, I deconstructed a couple of my blast furnaces from the nether because I thought I needed their bricks. Well, I'm dumb. I didn't actually need those fire bricks. I need coke oven bricks for what I'm working on. I don't know how I mixed those two up, especially considering I've been looking at them the entire time, but oh well. Looking back at this footage now that I know how power works, man, this electric blast furnace setup is painful to look at. I am losing so much power. I literally do not need all those steam generators. I can just do with 4. That's what's actually intended. You can even use 2 amp wires for each lane and it works perfectly fine, which is insane. But again, I didn't know all of this at the time. I'm guessing people that have actually played this pack can kind of guess what I'm working on right now. Nether bricks and coke oven bricks. What devious plan do I have? Well, I want to upgrade my coke ovens, but to do that, I need a lot of stuff. I thought it was going to be nice and simple at first, but remember, this is Gregtech New Horizons. Nothing is ever simple. The first and easiest step is obviously getting the coke oven bricks. Alright, I have those. Then I need to make some infernal bricks. To get infernal bricks, I have to start by throwing nether bricks into the electric blast furnace to heat them up. You see, everything was going perfectly fine. I was working on the next step of this entire project, and that is actually making coolant. Obviously, I have to cool down the hot nether bricks, and those actually turn into nether bricks. You see the problem? I was not reading properly. Yeah, I can't actually make coolant in LV. I need to make coolant in MV, the next tier up. That quite literally stops my progression. I was really hoping to get all of this done nice and quick, but nope, I have a lot more to do. Because guess what? If I want to complete this project, and I really want to, it's, one of my main goals, I need to step into MV tier, which is going to be terrifying. Naturally, everything is several times more difficult and expensive to make in there. But to take my mind off of that for a little bit, I went to the Nether to mine some more resources, including quartz and quartzite. This is when I remember to actually mention one of the awesome features they added in this update. Well, they backported all sorts of stuff from new versions of Minecraft. As you can see here, I can actually dual wield stuff like you can in new versions of Minecraft. Sure, they had that mod in here for it before, but I never really used that. Now, you can literally have one item in each hand and do whatever you want. Torches even light up the place around you, which is awesome. But most of the time I'll have the healing axe there so I can regenerate hunger. As you can see, they also added a lot of new blocks, which honestly is cursed, because making a blast furnace instead of the iron furnace just seems bizarre for a super old version of Minecraft like this. After that, I'm working on a new ore washing setup, so I can get more resources out of, well, most of my ores. I still didn't completely understand the power at this point, and thankfully I had all the settings turned off so none of the machines exploded, but losing these wires really does suck because, again, redstone alloy is expensive stuff. It took me quite a while, and losing more wires to realize that I actually needed 8 amp redstone wires for this line. And if you guys saw the end of last episode, this is what I've been working on. This huge area I've been hollowing out. I made this awesome glass pane that's completely clear. Yeah, this place is beautiful. A full pad of concrete on the floor. This is where I'm going to expand my base next. Well, probably in next episode. I barely used it in this part. It was mostly preparation. I also replaced a good portion of my floors with concrete so that I can run around my base faster. I really should have done this way sooner because this is so much better. And now I've started a tiny bit of work on getting into MV. The absolute first step I need to do is make some boards for my next circuits. To make those, I need wood pulp and glue. I really should have just made another fluid extractor. That would have been so much faster than harvesting my entire forest. But as you'll see throughout this video, I enjoy doing things the hard and stupid way. The next thing I actually need to make the MV circuits is gallium arsenide crystals. These are pretty complicated. First of all, I need to get gallium and arsenic. I mean, it's kind of in the name. So you're probably wondering what I'm doing with sphalerite dust, aka zinc. Well, I can actually throw this stuff into an electrolyzer to get both the zinc and sulfur out of it, but it gives me a tiny chance to actually get some gallium, which, is what I'm looking for. The arsenic, as you can probably see here, comes from Realgar dust? Railgar? Something like that. Anyways, same deal here. I literally just throw it into the electrolyzer as well. Obviously, I have to purify it first and everything, but this is how I get my arsenic. Thankfully, for now at least, this process is literally as simple as throwing 1 gallium and 1 arsenic dust into the electric blast furnace. It just works. Now, these crystals have all sorts of uses, but for now, I actually need to grind one up. It's a little bit sad to see, but this is the only way to actually make this dust. This gallium arsenide dust is extremely important because I need this stuff to make diodes. Okay, well, another type of diode. On one hand, it's nice that these diodes only take the tiny dust, and 1 normal dust makes 4 tiny ones, but it takes a ton of polyethylene, which thankfully I made in the last episode, but I'm definitely gonna have to automate at some point, and a bunch of copper wire, which is easy enough. With all of this combined, I can finally get proper diodes, not like crude makeshift ones that I had for the first tier of circuits. I already made some of the circuit boards I need for these circuits, but they are pretty expensive at the beginning. They actually cost gold wire. I mean, gold wire isn't too bad because I have the wire mills, but still, I don't have a ton of gold right now. But with the new circuit boards, diodes, and 3 LV circuits, I can finally make some MV circuits. This is awesome. I can finally start making some MV machinery. In a little bit at least. I have some other stuff I want to make first. I'm actually going to make a circuit assembler with these MV circuits as my first machine. Now you might be wondering, if it's an LV circuit assembler, why do I need MV circuits? Well, it kind of makes sense if you think about it. Being able to make the same tier circuit assembler is a little bit overpowered. I mean, not really, it just makes the recipe slightly cheaper. On top of, automating circuits, that's kind of an important part. I don't know how long or how many of these circuits I'll need to automate, but I should probably make quite a few, considering I'm going to be in MV for a while. It's been quite a while since I installed my solar boiler setup, but it's finally starting to calcify. I really thought it wouldn't take this long, but honestly I'm glad it has a super long lifespan to it. I know in the last episode I was saying I wanted to swap over to solar entirely. I mean, it's pretty awesome, sure, but I'd have to run way too many pipes for this. I mean, yeah, I could just dig a giant hole and place the solar in there, but I've actually been working on a slightly different idea that I think is far cooler. Before I get started on that, I decided to start clearing out some more stuff. For example, this old oil setup, the one that blew up last time, that's still tragic. The only problem is that the tier 1 pump can't actually reach the entire, sphere of the oil well, which means I have to clear out each of the 4 sides manually, which is pretty annoying. But I need to do this because, I still want as much oil as I can collect. Because of the previous oil incident on the surface, I've now decided to move every single thing I do underground. I don't even want to risk anything being destroyed this time. Even though, I've turned all of that off, still, I hate the surface. Underground is where it's at. The tiny problem I face now is actually how to move all the oil from that massive well super far away into my base. Thankfully, there's a super neat thing I can make called a long distance pipeline that actually helps with this. This thing costs tons, and I mean tons of steel to make, but it's way cheaper and, more importantly, less laggy than laying a ton of pipes all the way to my base. You need to make 2 of the long distance pipeline blocks as 1 input and 1 output, and then there's a second block you need to make, which is way cheaper, but that's what you have to place in between to connect the 2. It's actually pretty simple. There's also one for items, but I didn't have any need for that just yet. Overall, these blocks, I was gonna say building, because it technically is a building, but Whatever. This system is incredibly handy because all you need to do is just chunk load the input and output pipes, and your fluids or items just go between them automatically. It's pretty awesome. The best part is that these pipes actually have no limit on throughput. It only depends on the speed of pipes that you hook up to them, which is pretty neat. As you can probably tell here, I might have forgotten to actually open my recording software to show me making all of this. That would have been smart. But I made an advanced mixer, which is the MV tier mixer, and a combustion generator in, well, MV as well. You'll get to see me making these buildings a bit more later on, but they require slightly more advanced parts. I have all of the materials to make this, pretty much. I did have to create a lot of aluminum rods and plates and stuff like that, but it still requires plenty of like steel, copper, and bronze products. Now that I have this advanced mixer, I can actually start making coolant, which is nice because I can finally start cooling down those netherrack bricks to make infernal bricks, which means I can actually start work on the advanced coke oven. The main thing I wish I'd known at this point is a better coolant recipe. Long story short, I actually used the wrong one because I was using water and lapis dust when I could have been using distilled water, which is so much more efficient. The normal water recipe is 1:1, but distilled water is like a 4:1 ratio, so it only requires 1 lapis dust per operation. Unfortunately, I figured this out way too late, but oh well. The final step is to throw those ingots into a compressor to make the advanced coke oven bricks. This is super exciting. The entire process takes a very long time through all of the steps, but it is well worth it for how powerful this thing is. I also decided that I'm going to make 2 of them. My calculations were a bit off, so I still need to make a bit more. That's literally what I finished at the very end of this episode, but what matters is that 1 is done, and I can finally set it up. This literally replaces all 20 of those coke ovens I have going right now, and way more than that. This thing is super powerful. And I don't remember the exact number, but I think this is somewhere like 90 times faster than a normal coke oven, which is pretty stupid if you think about it. The only problem with these is that you don't get creosote oil as a byproduct. I mean, that's not really a problem considering creosote oil isn't super useful. Well, at least once you get other options, but still. While I was working on setting up the new coke oven, something interesting happened. My electric blast furnace just stopped working, which has been a slight problem. Even though I still have plenty of steam to power it, and 4 steam turbines is enough, it has problems. Yeah, that's right. It requires regular maintenance to keep it 100% efficient. Honestly, I didn't expect that. I mean, I should have, knowing this mod pack, but I was like, seriously? I have to fix this thing? Are you kidding me? I couldn't figure out how to fix it at first because the maintenance hatch was in a weird position, but you get the point. I have to do maintenance on my multi-block machines. Oh boy. Looking at it now, I actually realized why I was a couple blocks short for the second coke oven. My math was not wrong. In most of the multi-block machines, if they actually lose power, you also lose the recipe that it was currently working on. That really sucks, especially if you calculate things perfectly like this. Well, it's good to know all of this now. I guess I'll add like more generators to my next one so that they don't encounter this problem as well. But that's going to be fun to deal with from now on. Thinking about it now, that's one of the things I might honestly disable because it does not sound fun to deal with constantly. As you can probably guess, setting the advanced coke oven up is extremely easy. There's only one tiny problem. I actually need to fuel this thing, and it only accepts a couple of fuels. My best option is, funnily enough, charcoal. So my plan is to literally reroute the charcoal that it produces back into it before it goes into a container. Simple enough. With this far more powerful way to make charcoal, I decided to set up a steam boiler. Again, this is going to be another one of the solid fuel ones. I actually removed the old 2x2 in the second tier of my base, and I used those blocks to actually build this one. This boiler is a 334 boiler. I went for this one because it produces like 21,000 liters of steam a second, but I am considering making it one tier higher. Now, the only problem is that I haven't actually seen a 5 block tall version of this in the game, but it does say that you can make one of those on the wiki, so I might have to do some testing to see which one is true. But yeah, this is going to be my new main steam source. I've removed all of my other boilers at this point, or at least deactivated them because, well, they had no purpose anymore. Now that I have all of that set up, I wanted to start working on some oil production. And for that, I need quite a few things. First of all, I wanted to automate oxygen and hydrogen. This is pretty simple with an electrolyzer, when I learned quite a few interesting and important things. First of all, apparently you can place like conveyors and pumps inside of the machines. I didn't think I could do that. I kind of figured I could, but I never actually tried. So that's pretty interesting. I guess that's one way to do things. The second main thing I learned by doing all of this is that you really have to pay attention to which part of the machine is the face. Because no matter what you do, you literally cannot use the main face of the machine to actually input or output items, which really sucks, especially in tight spaces like this. I was trying to make this build compact when it really didn't have to be. This is a horrible setup, and even though I did it later on, the third most important thing I learned is that it is infinitely better to automatically output items instead of fluids. The conveyor belts, especially at LV tier, are absolute garbage because of how slow they are. Automatically outputting items is faster in every single scenario. The liquid pumps are much preferable because they are so much faster. So there's hopefully some useful information for once. I'll go ahead and save us both a bunch of time. This is my final Steam setup. It also doesn't work 100% right because in the middle, one of the machines is actually still a face, so that's a bit off. But as you can see, it is a huge spaghetti mess, but it works. I'll be perfectly honest, I'm surprised how well it actually works, even still. For how compact this thing is, it's actually really well designed. I'll also admit, I don't actually remember how all of it works. All I know is that on the left side is light fuel processing, and on the right side is heavy fuel processing. This is all of the steps, you know, distilling the oil and then combining it with hydrogen, everything like that. There are solids and liquids involved, so I have to have some fluid canners and, well, item pipes. Yeah, it's a nightmare. Oh, I guess I forgot to explain the reason why I need all of this. For MV, I wanted to try a slightly different power source than steam. By the end of the episode, I did decide I will be using way more steam, but I wanted to build this because it's fun. Either way, this entire system makes light and heavy fuel. You're probably wondering why I need both of those. Well, now that I have access to MV machinery, I can actually combine those two to make diesel, or normal fuel in this case. I don't know why the name is different sometimes, it just is. If you're wondering why the steam pipe is sticking up a bit in the middle, that's because the MV machine needs its own special generator, and it cannot be connected to the bottom power wire, which I had to move a bit later on, so it becomes even more of a spaghetti mess. If we remember from the last episode, if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid. And to my utter surprise in the end, the entire setup does actually work and create fuel. I mean, I knew I mathed everything out to make it work, I just didn't actually expect it to work first time. What's that quote I really like? No plan survives first contact with implementation or something like that. And that's like this entire mod pack in a shell. Either way, this is very exciting. I finally have fuel for MV automated. Even though I phased out the use of creosote oil at this point, I actually still have 2 million liters of it left, and no uses for it. Except for one. Using soapstone or talc, which I quickly figured out is literally the same thing, just different names, so probably slightly different, I can throw this dust into a distillery, of course with the creosote oil, to make lubricant. I don't exactly remember the other recipe, but I know you lose a lot of creosote oil in the process. But this recipe with soapstone or talc is actually a 1 creosote oil to 1 lubricant recipe, which is super nice. On the other hand, maybe I should just waste all the creosote oil because I don't have any other use for it. The soapstone and talc can actually be electrolyzed or centrifuged, and it has a ton of good materials in it, like silicone. So that's definitely the smart play, but oh well, this looked fun. Also, when I hear soap, I can't stop thinking about this song called Soap Lagoon by Masa Works Design. It's such a good song, but man, the lyrics are cursed. Not to mention one of the illustrations that's in there. Even though the electrolyzer setup is a great source of hydrogen, which I need for my oil setup, I also need a ton of oxygen to run the electric blast furnace. The only problem is that water is, H2O. So I only get 1 oxygen for every 2 hydrogen. However, the setup I made earlier to get even more products out of ore has given me tons of brown limonite dust. I hope you guys are thinking exactly what I am, because this dust actually has 2 oxygen to 1 hydrogen. This is great because now I'll still make 3,000 liters of oxygen and hydrogen at the same time, and a tiny bit of iron dust. The iron dust literally doesn't matter anymore now that I can automate the ore berries. It's actually more like a byproduct now, which is pretty funny. I'm super curious about how the maintenance for machines is calculated because I was running this electric blast furnace for so long without any problems, but then mysteriously I get another problem a little bit after I already fixed it. That's incredibly annoying because I just lost a bunch of redstone alloy. This still isn't the entire process of making an MV machine, but again, it's not super different. Oh yeah, the motors require magnetic steel rods this time instead of just normal magnetic iron, but that's super simple. The polarizer does those as well. The machine hull takes a bunch of aluminum plates, just like the LV hull takes steel plates, and then it requires wrought iron plates, an aluminum plate, and some copper wires. So again, very similar. I think it's pretty easy to figure out what I need a pump for. I wanted to tap into the other big oil well, the massive one that's been on fire since ever. This is so that I can restock my oil supply and make more fuel to use in MV. Thankfully, I have tons of light fuel and ethanol in reserve, so I have plenty to actually power the pump. What's also super interesting is the actual well itself. The first oil well I was harvesting actually had a plus shaped well. This one is just a single block. Another cool thing about the MV pump, and most MV machines, is that they're twice as fast but take 4 times the power. I mean, it's still worth it in the end because I did not expect this oil well to be drained that fast. Okay, well, it wasn't as fast as you guys can see it here, but it was still pretty quick. Still, seeing an entire oil well drained like this is pretty awesome. The first one had a ton of gravel in it, so there's still oil scattered around it. This one is entirely clean. The next major project I'm working on is actually building 2 new electric blast furnaces. You can probably see what I'm doing wrong immediately. One of the nights before actually recording this voiceover, I was literally thinking about how bad I messed this up because I was like, dang, I could have just done wall sharing instead, like I did with the normal blast furnaces. So yeah, I see that now. I know how I messed up, but obviously it's too late to change it at this point. That'll be something for the next episode instead. As you can probably guess, these blast furnaces have taken me quite a while to make. I hope you guys remember how expensive these things are, because I certainly do now. It took me a long time to get all of the materials. The worst part is definitely the heating coils though. Those are insanely expensive to make, especially because I had to do the entire mica and asbestos, all the other materials to actually make the coils and stuff like that. Yeah, it was horrible. The other major thing I can do now that I have MV machines is actually make just, well, everything so much easier than before. Here's the best example. I need huge wrought iron pipes so I can make a massive fuel pipeline. Now, originally I made an MV bending machine so I could make the plates easier, but a little bit after I made that, I had the genius idea. Why don't I just make an extruder? That makes things 1,000 times easier. It automatically assembles the pipes as well. You might have also noticed I've got a couple other machines there. One is the mixer that I've been using to make coolant, and the other is actually an assembler. Now that I have the MV assembler, I can, as you can probably guess, make even more things. The most important item I can make currently is actually duct tape. It has a super long, complicated name, but I'll just call it duct tape. To make this stuff, I need like carbon fiber, rubber plates, and glue. I've been able to make those for a long time now. The primary issue is that I couldn't combine them up until now. Now that I can make duct tape, it's actually a super simple solution to fix multi-block machines using the maintenance hatch. The only thing is that I don't think it's worth it for single-time repairs unless you have this stuff automated, but I'll use it for the first time to patch up all the issues. Anyways though, being able to automate this extruder and thus huge pipes, yeah, that's pretty awesome. That saves me a ton of work and time. You know one of the coolest things I can actually make with this extruder? That is the Diamond Builder's Wand. This will make building and, well, giant platforms and stuff like that super easy. The problem with stone and iron is that they break super quick, but diamond has a huge durability. You know the only problem? It takes a very long time to actually extrude this stuff. Not joking, the diamond plate alone takes 17 minutes to produce. Yes, 17 real-life minutes. I think the rod also takes like 3, so it's gonna be 20 minutes just to make one tool. That's a bit ridiculous. For a while now, I've been working on this massive pipeline to transport all of the fuel to my new electric blast furnaces. I have been using the long distance pipeline. Again, that building is super awesome and convenient, but the rest of the way will be normal wrought iron pipes. I'm going to go ahead and call this a bus. I'm guessing most of you know what a bus in a game like this means, but it's pretty much like a transport line for all of your resources. In this case, it's my power line because it's, well, fuel. And remember when I was saying earlier how powerful my ore berry farms were? I mean, just look at this. My barrels have so much ore in them. This is awesome. 9 ore berries equals 1 piece of ore, but you shouldn't have to do the math to just see how many stacks are in there. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of resources. By the end of recording, I actually had too much gold that is overflowing into the chest, which is a pretty awesome problem to have actually. Now that the electric blast furnaces are all set up and repaired, they're finally activated and boom, I am producing a ton of aluminum now. This is awesome because this is like my second major goal for this part. I wanted to automate aluminum production and that's what I'm doing. I just need to create more aluminum farms and then run an item line all the way over here. And I suppose not even new machines are safe from maintenance issues. Yes, this electric blast furnace has only been online for a tiny bit and it's already failed me. That is incredibly annoying, I have to say. I can't wait to deal with this more later on. Honestly, at this point, I might actually just disable that mechanic, because it is seriously annoying. Besides just making pipes, the extruder makes all sorts of other parts way cheaper and easier to produce. In this case, I've actually been wasting a lot of resources on making small gears. Small gears require 1 plate and 2 rods, which is 2 ingots if you actually think about it. The extruder, on the other hand, lets me make small gears for literally half of that cost. This is pretty awesome. There's just one tiny problem. I couldn't actually get the extruder to work. Now, it took me quite a while to figure out what was happening, so there's some weird stuff going on here. You see, there are actually 2 types of molds. I made all of these molds way earlier on using my smeltery, which I recently destroyed. I still have all of the blocks, I just picked it up because, well, that was in the way of my new staircase to the upper level. To make these molds, I actually need to make aluminum brass molds, then use some tools to cut them into specific shapes, and finally pour steel over them to actually make these molds. If you look very carefully, you can actually see the difference between the 2 molds. The extruder molds that I need for these parts actually have text on top of them, and that's what I couldn't understand for the longest time. I was sitting here for a super long time looking through all the recipes, and I just couldn't figure out how to get these special molds. Because the recipe for both looks the exact same. and that's kind of the problem. I actually still have no clue how you're supposed to get these, and it doesn't make much sense to me because it looks like all the recipes should be able to make both. I mean, we all know what I did because I do this best. I did just cheat in the extruder molds that I actually needed because, again, I don't know how you're supposed to get them. I have all the machinery and tools to do so, I just can't make them for some reason. The only thing I can actually think of at this point is using the extruder itself, then either the aluminum brass part or the mold I already made and extruding steel to make new molds. Yeah, I don't even know. I'll have to figure this out the next time I play. Running one electric blast furnace for a super long time creates a ton of pollution. Now imagine those two I added, and well, this one going at the same time. It produces way too much pollution, and I finally had enough. It's an interesting mechanic for sure, but I really don't feel like dealing with pollution for the entirety of this run, and then having to build new buildings to deal with it. So I eventually decided to just disable pollution altogether. It's what most players do, and it makes sense. The only problem is that it actually breaks my first electric blast furnace because I had a special muffler on it that produced less pollution if I have an air filter inside, and yeah, I guess that block just doesn't exist anymore, at least when you disable pollution. So I just gave myself one of the normal muffler hatches to replace it. Now that I've built my new coke oven, I have automated aluminum production, which is super cool to think about. It's finally time to start work on my final goal of this episode. That is actually going to be upgrading my blast furnace on the bottom floor. You see, now that I have MV machinery, it's actually possible to upgrade those coils to Kanthal. The only issue is that this process is extremely difficult and time consuming, but I think it's super cool, so I need to do this because it is technically possible. To start out, I actually need to make Kanthal dust, which requires chrome, aluminum, and iron. I was a bit curious, so I actually looked this up, and Kanthal is like an actual brand name or company, something like that, that actually produces these wires that are made for high temperature applications. So that's pretty neat. And yes, it's literally the same combination: iron, aluminum, and chrome. Pretty neat. I guess I didn't show it before, but here is the final automated setup. I actually have to grind the aluminum ore berries first, which turns it into a dust. I have to compress the dust into raw aluminum before it can be smelted down into ingots. I decided to throw a few blocks that can't be smelted into the electric blast furnace so that when one fills up with a stack, it'll start supplying the other one, because pipes are weird and it won't evenly split them. Everything was going well until I hit a major issue with this whole project. You see, to smelt Kanthal, I actually need way more power to my current blast furnace. So, you're probably wondering, well, how am I supposed to do this? The answer, not easy. This is going to take me down a massive rabbit hole of other machinery I did not expect to need. I hope you guys are prepared for what's about to come, because let me just tell you, it is stupidly complicated, just for a tiny upgrade to my machine as well. As you can see, I'm currently in a test world because I was hoping my original plan would work. My original plan was just adding more LV energy hatches. You see, I can't just hook up more generators because the LV energy hatches only take 2 amps. That means I can only have 4 generators on the machine. So yeah, that's a slight problem. And that leaves me with one solution I really didn't want to do, because I knew this was going to be the difficult route, which I should have expected either way, but here we are. I actually need to make an MV energy hatch so that I can accept higher tier energy. So that's what I need to make next. Here's the tiny problem about making the MV hatch. I need solar grade silicone. How the heck am I supposed to get this stuff? This is a super high tier space material. Well, there's only one option. The chemical reactor actually has a very specific recipe I can do. It requires a bunch of salt. So I'm going to go get some of that first. I actually had a ton of salt in storage, I just didn't realize it. Plus, mining for a while lets me take my mind off of the complexity of what I'm about to make. Oh yeah, do you guys remember that chicken from like the second or third part? I always wondered where this little guy went. Looks like he's stuck in the mine. Pretty funny. The entire process to make solar grade silicone is actually super interesting. To start out, I need salt, which I just gathered. I throw that into a centrifuge to get its parts. Now, pretty much everyone should know what salt is made up by now. NaCl, which is sodium and chlorine. My favorite thing about salt is how these two extremely toxic chemicals can actually be consumed by humans once they're combined to make salt. Always been weird to me. Anyways, the first thing I need to do is combine silicone with chlorine. This gives me silicone tetrachloride. Yes, it's literally 1 silicone and 4 chlorine. Alright, that makes enough sense. But here's the part of the process that confused me a lot. Okay, so I take the silicone tetrachloride and put it back into a chemical reactor with all of the sodium. This gives me solar grade silicone, but also the salt back? Like, I seriously didn't expect this process to give me all of my salt. I thought, like most other processes, it consumes everything. But no, this entire process literally recycles all of the components. In the end, you quite literally just need to put in silicone and you get solar grade silicone out. Very interesting to say the least. A little bit later, I decided to just automate this entire process since it's literally that easy to do. I add the silicone in and, well, the machines do the rest. It's pretty awesome. I'll definitely need more solar grade silicone for stuff later on. This was definitely a great investment, especially for how easy it was to make. One of the coolest things I found when scrolling through recipes is this. I can electrolyze sodalite, which is one of the things you can find in lapis veins, to get aluminum dust, silicone, and sodium, and a tiny bit of chlorine. Like, all of these crazy good materials from one resource that's practically useless? That seems pretty awesome. This isn't even mentioning the fact there are so many other cool materials that I can electrolyze now that I have MV machinery and get stuff like aluminum dust or alumina, silicone, all sorts of good materials. I definitely need to make a little factory and start electrolyzing / centrifuging so many resources to get good stuff. Some other good examples are like clay. I don't remember everything it gives, but alumina is one of them, and considering I have clay automated since last episode, yeah, that's definitely going on the list. In the background, I've been working on making this monocrystalline silicone boule. This thing requires gallium arsenide crystals, which I've made previously, and 32 of the solar grade silicone. This thing is super expensive, but it's a step towards the MV energy hatch I need. Now that I have this, I can throw it into a cutting machine to make wafers. It also gives me a tiny portion, literally 1/8 of the solar grade silicone back, which is kinda handy. These wafers are super cool and have all sorts of uses. I'm guessing also for higher tier machines, because that's what the crafting recipes look like. But for now, I need to convert them into another type of wafer, I guess. The main problem is that I need a laser engraver. Well, that's easy enough. It's actually the lens for the laser engraver that's going to be the issue. The laser engraver has all sorts of super cool uses, and I'm guessing more important ones later on, because the early tiers don't actually do much. It's just like making cool patterns in blocks. There are only a couple recipes that are actually useful, like this. But for this, I'm going to need an emerald to make the lens I need. Looking at it now, I realize that I can actually use an emerald plate as my backup option, but thankfully I happen to have an exquisite emerald that I actually need to make the lens. That's very nice, because I really wasn't expecting to have one of these in storage. I have to take this emerald, which is kind of sad to lose because of how rare it is, and throw it into a lathe, which seems very dangerous, but okay. It also takes 2 minutes, so I'll be back in a little bit. I'm getting way closer to the end product I actually need now that I can convert this wafer into the energy wafer, but that's still only a part of the process. You see, I still have to cut that energy wafer into even smaller parts, but to do that, I need a brand new cutting machine, because the LV tier ones won't work. I mean, naturally. I'm also not surprised if things don't work at this point. Of course I'm going to need the higher tier machines. Thankfully, I still had enough materials to actually make this thing. I was concerned I didn't have enough stuff to make the cutting wheel I would need, but I had 5 spare ingots in reserve to make the I had 5 spare cobalt brass ingots in reserve. Anyways, you all know the drill. I have to throw the new energy wafers in there, add some lubricant to make it faster, and wait. Yeah, it's gonna be a while. I'm also super proud of a joke I made a little bit earlier. Since I've been converting all of that creosote oil into lubricant, I was thinking, what am I supposed to do with 1 million liters of lubricant? Wait, don't answer that question. Like, sometimes I actually have a half-decent joke. One of the last components I need is actually quite easy. It's fine aluminum wire, which that's simple, just throw aluminum in the wire mill, and some magnetic steel rods, which I have plenty of at this point. It's literally just that power wafer thingy that took 99% of the work to do. And finally, I can make my MV energy hatches and get back to what I've been working on this entire time. Do you guys even remember what I was working on? If you don't, I'm trying to make new canethol coils for my blast furnace. I know, a lot has happened since I started this project. Even though I have these new energy hatches, there's still a tiny problem. That's actually producing enough energy. So I did the math, and in theory, I should need 16 generators to make all of this work. So I built a couple of transformers and was hoping to make it work, but every time you activate it and it fails, you actually lose the product that's being made. I lost quite a bit of canethol during this, which really sucks because I didn't have much chrome at the time. After a little bit of testing, apparently the main thing that was going wrong in my setup is actually the transformers. I made 4 transformers because I did do the math properly the first time. I just thought I messed it up when I actually tried to build it all, but here's how it should look. You see, each one of the MV power lines requires 2 transformers, because each transformer converts 4 amps of LV to 1 of MV. That's why I need 4 transformers. As you can see, each of those 4 lines has 4 generators connected to it, and that's why I need 16 generators total. This setup looks horrible and absolutely cursed, which it is, but it should work. Now, I'm guessing most of you are probably wondering, why aren't you using MV generators? That's the smart and efficient thing to do. Well, honestly, yes, you're right, that would be. But if you've watched me before, you should know I'm not that bright, and I wanted to do this the hard way because I thought it'd be more interesting. I can confirm that this is definitely not the intended way to make this work, but all that matters is that I managed to make it work in the end. And finally, after all this preparation, I can start making some canethol ingots. Well, not entirely, because these are hot canethol ingots. I'll have to throw them in a chemical bath, obviously an MV tier 1, and then I can get my canethol ingots. I also upgraded the steam valve that was taking steam out of my tank to an MV one, because the LV one only does like 20,000 liters a second. This one does 40,000 liters a second, but my pipes are only rated for 24,000 liters a second. Anyways, I need to pump as much steam as I possibly can into these turbines, because it's just barely going to be enough. As a matter of fact, I added a couple of combustion generators to the end. Actually, these are gas turbines instead. But this is just a tiny extra power source in case I don't have enough steam to power everything. Plus, I have a ton of hydrogen in that tank right there, and I don't feel like transferring all of it, so I might as well use it. One thing I wish I had known while doing this is that the recipe in the chemical bath actually takes a minute for each ingot. Considering I need to process 2 stacks of these, that's literally going to take like over 2 hours to do. So the oxygen recipe in the blast furnace is not worth it. It's just better to do the normal recipe because that takes 60 seconds. Obviously, it would have been way smarter if I had automated all of this, but oh well. You guys don't have to wait for it. I do. While my canthol production is running, I actually have another side project I wanted to work on that, oddly enough, also involves emeralds. Literally haven't used emeralds up until now in the playthrough, by the way, so it's weird I need emeralds twice in a short amount of time. Anyways, I want to make the MV tier mining machine. I actually haven't tried the LV tier one, but I thought I might as well make the MV one since I can. It also takes electrum, which I'm making for the very first time. I think I actually have some in storage, but it's super cheap to make, just silver and gold. I made this miner because there is an ore I want some of, but I don't really feel like mining manually right now. And I don't need that much of this ore. I only really want it for its byproduct, which is chrome. The miner is very similar to the oil well, and at first I was a bit confused on how it worked because it was actually producing cobblestone. It only collects cobblestone because it's actually digging a tunnel straight down to the bottom of the world, much like the oil pump. So yeah, it doesn't mine all of the blocks around it, which is a good thing. I kind of hope there is a machine like that to clear out areas better, but I know there are some awesome tools and stuff like that later on. But all the miner really does is scan in a 41 by 41 area, at least for the MV tier machine. Obviously, it's different for each tier. And yeah, it kind of just like sucks the ore right out of the ground. I know at some point here, I also had a cool idea for the big suck. I'm guessing no one knows what that's actually referencing. I hate to admit it, but there are some parts of Borderlands 3 that actually is funny, and I do kind of like the big suck mission. I also have to say, the miner works extremely fast. I think it's like 2 seconds per ore, which there's definitely still a lot, but yeah, that was faster than I expected. And of course, it goes all the way down to bedrock level, which is cool. So I was super curious how this thing actually extracted the ore, and I needed to look for myself. As you can see here, I think it's pretty obvious. It actually just replaces the ore with cobblestone. I'm really glad it does it like this because that can save a lot of lag. Instead of just making tiny block air gaps everywhere, yeah, that's a super cool system. And depending on the ore I'm trying to mine, I will likely use this thing, maybe not. Because apparently it only gives you fortune on the small ores it collects, not the large ores. Unless I misread that, and it does give you fortune for everything, I'm not 100% sure. A while later, once I had 2 stacks of Canthal ingots, I threw them into the wire mill. Thankfully, I can use the LV tier wire mills. And from there, I have to throw those wires into the MV tier assembling machine with a ton of mica foil that I made earlier on. It's a good thing that I made this much now because it really comes in handy. And interestingly enough, molten cupronickel, which I've been producing a lot of these ingots as well because it's useful for all sorts of stuff, and you need cupronickel wires to actually make the MV motors. So pretty important. However, I did accidentally throw an entire stack of ingots in there when I only needed like half, I think. 16 or 32? I think it's like 32. And very soon I'll have enough Canthal coils to finally upgrade my blast furnace. This is super exciting. It's also at this point that I discovered a very cool building I'll have to try out next time. The pyrolysis oven? Something like that? Either way, this seems to be a massive multi-block coke oven, but not like the advanced one I just made. If you remember, the advanced coke oven requires fuel of its own, but creates charcoal and other coke coal products super fast. This oven requires energy, just like any other multi-block, but interestingly enough, you can create so many cool products out of wood. You can make like wood tar, wood vinegar. I've never heard of that before. I don't know if it's real or not, but it sounds cool. You can also make like coal gas using steam, which is pretty interesting. But the craziest thing is once you get into HV, which is the next energy tier, you can straight up just turn wood into oil. Okay? Now that makes absolutely 0 sense. And it's definitely not realistic, but it sounds pretty awesome. I might have to try that when I get there. But I do have some other cool ideas for oil that I'll likely explore in the next episode. I don't think there were that many clips of me in my mission log this time, but I'm guessing at least a couple of people are mad that I don't just accept every single reward I get. That's so that my inventory doesn't get clogged up with junk I don't want. So as some bonus footage, after I recorded everything else, I decided to finally accept all of my rewards, and there was a ton of good stuff in there. It was mostly coins. Also, like half of it was junk, but there were some really cool items. I got a bunch of MV circuits, some duct tape, a couple of really good tools that I'll probably never use, and all sorts of other neat things. Yeah, mostly junk. And that's what I was just talking about. I'm gonna throw like 99% of this junk out. I can't even recycle food and stuff like that. I was also recording myself opening all of these because I was really hoping to get the Infi Miner out of the LV loot bags, because apparently that is a drop. Maybe I should have been smart and gotten Fortune for better chances. But yeah, that like infinite mining hammer, it's a unique tool in Tinker's Construct, and I've known about it pretty much since I started playing mods, since that thing has literally been around forever, and it would be awesome to get because it literally has like infinite speed and infinite durability. It would have been awesome for mining, but oh well. A long while later, the Canthal coils are finally completed. I hope you guys are excited because I am. I really can't wait to see how this thing works. It took me a while to replace everything and then, get it to work. But these coils are pretty cool because they allow me to make even more things in the blast furnace. But the single best part is that it speeds up most recipes. Now, I'll admit, I don't exactly remember how the electric blast furnace works in scales, but apparently the more heat your coils can handle and the more power you throw into it, the faster the recipes. For example, the gallium arsenide crystals are literally twice as fast as before, so they only take 30 seconds instead of 60, which is very nice. The only problem is that it's also costing me more power. So I guess in the next episode, I'm gonna have to upgrade my power supply even further. I'm considering adding like a second or even third steam boiler, probably even that pyrolysis oven to get even more charcoal and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm gonna need major upgrades to my power grid to actually do stuff later on, but that's for me to worry about in like 2 to 3 weeks. I got a ton of stuff done in this episode, and I'm extremely proud of all of it. I hope all of you enjoyed watching, because I definitely know I enjoyed playing this. Gregtech New Horizons is always super fun, even though it's a bit slow right now because, well, I'm kind of slow and it's taking me a while to figure stuff out. I still enjoy the journey. As usual, thank you all for watching. I truly appreciate it, and a special thank you to my channel members. You guys are all awesome. This is going to be Enzo from LookIntoGaming, signing out.